Okay, so like previously what we did is like we created an asynchronous feature method and like two of asynchronous feature methods we created. And the next what we are doing is like we are updating existing records. Okay. And the next in this method, like what we are doing is like we are calling this asynchronous apex method. So from an apex class, we can call any asynchronous apex methods, right? Like we are calling this. Whenever we are calling these, it is performing two, it is generating two logs, isn't it? Here you can see, we can see two log files.
Yes.
One is for synchronous operation, another one is for asynchronous operation. So here the synchronous operation is in a debug log. Initially what we did is like we queried all the lead records, isn't it? Here we queried all the lead records. That is a synchronous query. So to perform these tasks, initially we need to get all the lead records, right? To update lead source as a web, initially we need to get all the lead records, right? So that's what we are doing. So this will be come up in a synchronous action, synchronous query. So after doing this, for this asynchronous method, we are passing the data whatever we queried, isn't it? So here we are passing existing record IDs. So here from the key set, we are passing existing record IDs, isn't it?
Yeah.
So after passing this record IDs, what we are doing is we are iterating through each and every record and we are updating lead source to web. Okay.
Yes.
So it is about the first synchron, like a first method. Similarly, if you want to call a second feature method also, you can do it easily. How we can call a second feature method? Same thing, like a apex class name, Control C. I can paste it at the bottom. After this, we need to specify a method name. So what is our method name? What is
Create
our
lead records.
create lead records? So for this, do we need to pass anything? Any data we need to pass? So here, is this method expecting any input here? Is it
No.
no, right? So here we need not to specify any input.
Yes.
By default, it will create a record in a system. So I'm highlighting it, I'm executing it. So it is executing. Again, it is generating like
Logs.
two log files. So initially, like here it is running asynchronous action, then it is giving synchronous operation. Okay. It means if you want to run one asynchronous operation, there will be two log files. There two log files will be generated. Okay. So I'm opening last one, a previous log file. Here you can see the update records. You can see the number of future callouts. We did not perform any external website callouts. But if you look at this data, like there will be all records present in a system will be updated. So if you go to the leads, every lead source will be updated with the web. You can check it later. Okay. And we created a record also in a system. So far everything is clear, right? Now we need to see another
Yes.
scenario, that is like we need to call one feature method from another feature method. Okay, let's suppose what I will do is I will be having apex synchronous apex here, right? Lead asynchronous here, right? Now what I want to do is I need to call this method. Now I need to call this method from this one. Now we'll save this code. Now I'll execute this one. It's generating log. What's the thing we did? So in this, it needs to do an error. See here you can see an error. Status. Feature method cannot be called feature method. So in one feature method, we won't be able to call another feature method. You can see previously you can see a status as success in the previous cases. But in a status here you can see feature method cannot be. So here it is loading the data. I'm searching with the name feature. So you can see feature method cannot be called from a feature or batch method. Okay, we can't call one future method in another future method, or future methods in a batch apex also we won't be able to call an another future method. Understood? This is the exception we
Yes.
are getting. So that thing you need
Yeah.
to understand. So the next concept is which apex?
Batch apex. Huh?
So yeah, what do you know about batch apex so far? Came good to the batch apex. As we discussed this thing in a trailhead, that's why I'm asking what you remembered regarding batch
Yeah.
apex. So batch apex ekkada use chestar, where we use batch apex means like we'll use batch apex wherever like we'll be having, let's suppose if you're having million and millions of records. Okay, so if you want to perform actions in a future on a million and millions of records, lot of records, like if you want to perform DML actions, or like if you want to delete millions of records from a Salesforce system, if you want to deploy
Mm.
millions of records in a Salesforce system, whenever the resources are available at the time, we'll take help of batch apex. Okay,
Yeah.
in the batch apex we'll be having several methods. What are those methods? What are the different methods present in a batch apex?
No, I did not.
So I told we'll be having three methods. One is start method, then next execute method, then finally we'll be
Finish
having
method.
finish method. So each
Yeah.
and every method having its own functionality. So we'll discuss this thing by writing a code so that it will be much clear to you. In this, like while executing this, we'll be having different parameters, that is a batch instance and a scope of the batch, and like how many records we need to specify in a batch. We'll see this example by writing a code so that it will be much clear. Okay, we'll look into this. Like we'll create another apex class, new apex class. So I'll give class name like lead batch class. Is it fine?
Yes.
Lead batch, so that it will be you can easily pick up the code from your arc, like we both are using the same arc, right? That I can,
Yes.
you can take it. So it is my class name. So in apex, how we can write a multiple line comments in a triple quotations, isn't it? Triple quotation star, actually single star is enough, but I'm writing double stars. In this I need to write a multiple line comments, actually that's why I'm taking it. So how many methods we are having? First method is start method.
Start. Execute.
Then next we'll be having execute method. Sorry. So execute method will be execute only once. Okay. The next after execute method will be having which method?
Finish. Finish method.
So like here, like I tried to give a description regarding this. So execute only once. Start method executes only once. Sorry, not execute method. Start method executes only once. So like a batch apex will returns batch scope, or like yeah, it is a description. Like I'll give you a description regarding start method. So it will execute only once. The next return batch scope or records. So like let's suppose if you want to query, let's suppose if you want to perform DML operations on a data. Let us assume scenario like you need to perform. Give me a minute. Okay. So what I am going to explain here is like I'm giving description regarding start method. So start method will execute only once while in a batch class, and it will return a scope, like on which scope we are executing this specific method. And it will give you a scope or records. Like from a Salesforce system, if you want to return a records, we can use this. Give me a minute.
Okay.
So return a scope or records. So now it will return whenever you execute a start method, here will be write a dynamic query. After writing a dynamic query, it will return scope or records, whatever the operation we are performing, those records it will return. So with the start method, by writing a dynamic query, we can query up to 50 million records. Is it possible with a synchronous query?
No.
No, right? It is an advantage of asynchronous
Batch
apex.
up.
So now, like we saw the description regarding this start method, right? Now we'll see how to implement this start method. Okay. So the rule is like it should be any type of method. I'm defining it in a public context. So whenever you want to write a dynamic query, we need to use database.query locator. So we'll be having database.query locator. I'm taking help of database.query locator method. So it is my method. So in this query locator here, like what we can do is with this, we need to specify a start. So whenever you want to write a dynamic query, we need to take help of database.query locator method. So by taking help of this method, we can write a dynamic query. Okay. And whatever the query we are running here, it should be run in batchable context. On which context we need to write a batch class? Batchable context. So prior to these, like whenever you want to implement a batch class, it should be implements on batchable interface. We need to implement it on batchable interface. So for that, what I'm doing is here I'm saying implements database, like we need to take a data from Salesforce. That's why I'm using database dot batchable method. Okay, I'm taking help of batchable method. So like I need to grab the data corresponding to Salesforce objects. So that's why like I'm specifying generic thing here, S object. I'm writing S object. Okay, so I'm specifying S object. Any doubts so far?
No. I'm clear.
So whenever you want to implement a batch apex, we need to implement a batch apex on a batchable interface. We implemented a batch class on batchable interface. And on which scope we are doing this? We are doing it on a S object, or means any object. On any object, we can write any query and anything. That's why we are specifying that context here. And so in a start method, we need to, if you want to write a dynamic query, we need to use a database.query locator. Database is a class. In this, we'll be having query locator method. So for this like batchable interface, like in a start method, we need to run the start method in a batchable context. So for that, what I'm doing is I'm saying database dot so batchable context. I'm taking help of batchable context. So batchable context, for this, whenever you want to access this batchable context, we need to define it with some variable. So let's suppose here I'm specifying this batchable context with a variable BC. So clear? So whenever you want to if you want to write a start method, simply you can write this line of code. Public database.query locator, which is used to define a write a dynamic query. And like whenever you want to start executing a query, we need to take help of start method, and we need to run the start method in a batchable context. So after this, like this method needs to return all the lead records present in a system. So in this, like whatever the example we worked in a future apex, same thing I'll do here. Is it fine?
Yes.
So here what I'll do is I want to return a data corresponding to the all leads present in a system. So what I'll say is return database dot, I need to get a query locator which we took in a top. Okay. And here in the quotations, you can write a dynamic query. So how we can write a dynamic query? We need to select, what are the fields you need to select? I need to select just ID field, comma, source field value, from which object we need to get a data? Lead object. Is it clear? So we can write a dynamic query like this. This about start method. So with the start method, what we are doing? Execute only once. This method execute once whenever the batch class execution starts. Once it is executed, then like it will return a scope or it will return a records. Like we are running this in a batchable context. Now it will return we are specifying dynamic query. It will return records. Like let's suppose if you have more than 10,000 records also, we can get all the records. So with this dynamic query, we can get up to 50 million records. Okay. So after this execute method, we'll be having another method. Sorry, after the start method, we'll be having another method called execute method. Now we'll see how to write an execute method. So for that, initially we'll write a some theory. Okay. Is it fine? Like what is execute
Yes.
method? Like how we can execute this execute method. Now I'll write a point. So first point is, so execute method, like I'm keeping heading also. So coming to the execute method, the first point is execute for each batch or chunk of data. So is it possible to like perform a DML operation on more than 10,000 records in a single transaction? Is it possible in a Salesforce? Can we update more than 10,000 records in a single transaction?
No.
No, right? So for that, like here we'll be having batch size variable. So whenever you specify batch size while executing the batch apex, at the time what happens is like it will execute batch wise, means chunks of data. Let's suppose if like we can specify batch size from 1 to 10,000. So sorry, 2,000 I think. Okay. And like while specifying these, like let's suppose if you specify batch size as at 2,200, so for the single transaction, for the first transaction, it will update 200 records in a single transaction. So after, let's suppose you might have a doubt, like let's suppose with a single transaction we can update 2,000 records in a Salesforce system. Okay. And what you are doing is in a single transaction itself, you executed, like you updated 1,500 records. For the next time, again, you need to update 1,500 records. Let's suppose if your batch size is 1,500. Then if you follow synchronous apex, what happens is 1,500 plus 1,500, 3,000 records will be there. So in a single transaction, we can't be update 3,000 records. Means entire transaction will be rolled back if you use a synchronous apex. But with the asynchronous apex, what happens is for one chunk of data, it will execute this method for one time. And for the next time, all the governor limits will be set up to 0. Understood?
Yes.
Okay. For each and every chunk, like we'll be having new governor limits. It's an another benefit by using synchronous apex. New governor limit for every batch. Makes sense, right?
Yes.
The next point is, so it should have void return type. It should not return any data. It should be have void return type only. Like whatever the execute method you are using, it should have a void return type. These are the rules you need to follow while like this is about a short brief regarding execute method. Now we'll construct an execute method. Fine. So regarding
Yes.
error, what is that error? We'll be having two problems. What are those? Line 1, class batch must implements the method void database dot batchable execute. So it should have this method. That's what it is saying. Okay, we'll do that now. So public, which return type it should have? It should have void return type. And which method we need to use here? Execute method. So on which context this execute method needs to run? It should also run in a batchable context only.
Batchable context.
So I'm specifying these things as it easily. It should run in a batchable context. And while running it in a batchable context, we need to get all the lead records, right? For this execute method, which records we need to update? We need to update all the lead records which we queried by writing a dynamic query. Okay.
Yes.
So this data is present, it is returning here by taking help of query locator method. We are returning this data. So which is in a batchable context. To get this data which is present in a batchable context, we can use a we can define some variable. So we need to get list of lead records. Here, like we are getting a scope or records. I'm using variable, let me variable name like scope. Okay. So by passing scope here, we need to, scope means here it contains all the records, like whatever the dynamic query contains here, all those records will be present in the scope. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay. This is about this.
It is variable name, right?
Yeah, it's variable name only, but like whatever the variable you define, but the exact correct name for this is scope. That's why I'm using scope only. Like if you implement some project, there also you can write scope, no issues.
Okay.
Okay, now what we need to do, we need to iterate through all the lead records, right? So like whatever we are having previously, like I'll specify that here we iterated through lead records, right? I'm doing same. There it is. I'm copy pasting from there. For lead record, like I'm taking a variable name like lead record only, but I want to take all these records from a scope. Scope means it contains all the results, right? Isn't it? Scope means it will
Yes.
contain all the results. So then next, what is the best practice for updating a record? What is the best practice? We should not have DML actions inside a loop. That's a best practice whenever you
Yes.
update a record. That's why I'm specifying update record method outside the scope,
The
like
loop.
outside the loop. So now I want to update a scope. Scope means it contains all the lead records. Okay, now it's saved. Like we'll be having class lead batch must implements database dot batchable finish method. It means whenever you want to create a batchable apex, it should have three methods. First method is a start method. Second method is an execute method. After the execute method, we need to have a which method? Finish method.
Finish.
Okay. So now I want to define a finish method. So for this, you need to understand, right, like what it contains actually and how we need to define the finish method. You need to have that knowledge. So coming to the finish method, first point corresponding to finish method is execute only once for one apex, one batch apex, like for the complete class, it executes only once. So start method also execute only once, execute method also executes only once. Okay. So after this, so this execute finish method will be called when all batches are processed. It means all the like will be having execute method in top of this, right? So like let's suppose if you have million records, let's suppose if you specify batch size as a 2000, it needs to perform same action how many times? Like let's suppose 100 times, let us assume. So after completing all the 100 chunks data processing, then only this finish method will be called up. Okay,
Yeah.
can be used for post processing. Post processing means after performing some DML actions, if you want to send some email kind of things like that, like let's suppose if you after doing that, if you want to run a flow in a background, such kind of actions if you want to do, like at the time you can use a finish method. So most widely it is used, sorry, so most widely it is used to getting calls on calls. Give me a minute. So where we discussed like yeah, we saw the points regarding execute method. Now how you need to define a execute method, you need to know that how we can execute it. Sorry, yeah, we need to terminate it, right? First done, perfect. First it's executed successfully. Yes, now we defined a multi-line comments, everything is done. Now we need to define an execute method. So finish method, public void finish. In the finish method, if you want to specify any like a post processing operation, like sending an email kind of things, you can specify that code here. We need to execute it also in a batchable context only. That's why I'm copy and pasting batchable context here. So as of now, what I want to do is after executing this complete thing, I need to keep a debug statement. So here, sorry, it's a method, right? I need to keep a debug statement. Simply what I do is system dot debug. In the debug statement, I'll write a statement like batch finished. Like that, I need to give some notification kind of thing. Okay. So batch finished. Okay. It's about topics. I will see whether we will get any errors or not. Now method does not exist or incorrect signature. While code from the database. On which line it is? Line 9. We're getting an error. Okay, we'll go to 9th line and we'll see return. Like uh, do we did any mistakes in this database? Sorry, here we need to use get query locator. We need to get the data, right? That's why we need to use a get query locator. Oh, it's what happening? Like it is behaving like this. ఇది ఎంటర్ చేస్తుంటే రిమైనింగ్ క్యారెక్టర్స్ పోతున్నాయి. ఎందుకు పోతున్నాయి నాకు అర్థం
యా
అవుతలేదు.
పోతున్నాయి.
ఎందుకు మీరు ఏమైనా
చేసివ్వండి.
మీరు ఏదో సెట్టింగ్ చేసినట్టున్నారు.
నేనేం చేయలేదు.
చూడండి
యా
ఏమైంది ఇక్కడికి వచ్చిందా? ఓకే. So we'll see whether we'll get any other errors or not. Problems 4, 32 line missing this one. This second line is correct. Lead batch. Which one is missing? 32nd line. We'll be having this one, right?
Okay.
It is also there. Somewhere semicolon is missing here for the system.debug statement.
Yeah.
Now everything is fine. Now we created an batch apex. Now it's very, very clear to you, I think. I hope you are clear with this one. Okay.
Yes.
Now we'll see
Yes.
like how to execute this one. Okay. So now to execute it, I'll go to the debug logs. Okay. So I'm coming to debug logs. I'll maximize this thing so that it will be much clear to you. Now, initially what we need to do, we need to instantiate this class. First, what we need to do, class instantiation. Okay, I'm doing that first. So first we need to specify class name. What is our class name? Lead batch. Okay, so for this I want to create an instance. So for that, whatever the name you want to give, you can give that variable name. Lead batch instance, I'm giving name like this. Okay, so to instantiate a class, what we need to do is new lead batch. In this way we can instantiate a class. Clear? This one is clear, right? First
Yes.
one is clear to you. Now we need to call a batch class. Okay, how we can call? With the batch size, with a specific batch size, I need to call a batch class. So I'm specifying that. Call batch class with batch size of how many records we can query for a single transaction. Shall we go with a 20, 30, 40, 50 or 100 or 200? Let's suppose by default, if you don't specify, it will take 200. let's suppose I'm going with the 50 now. I'll go with the 50.
Okay.
So in this, like what we need to do is whatever the we need to call an execute method. Okay. So how we can specify an execute method? So database dot. So database is a standard class. We need to take help of database. From this, we need to call a execute batch. Execute batch. So we'll be having different things in this. Like here, we'll be having Apex object batchable. So Apex object means which instance you want to call, and batchable means here you need not to specify any records. By default, it will be take 200. So I'll go with a whatever the options you go, that could be better. Let's suppose I'm going with this one. So in this execute batch, in a batchable, what I'll do is here we need to specify an instance. Control C, Control V, comma, like how many records we need to perform for a single transaction. We need to do it how many records we need to do 50.
50.
Okay. Now what I'll do is I'll execute this one. This one only we need to execute, right? Logs. Okay. So no such column source or entitlement. Batch apex. Which error we got? Is giving something. Batchable context implements. Like something is missing. So batchable context implements. Batchable context implements. So where it is, on which line it is? 15th line or somewhere. So I think in a first class, I think it is. Where will be having some error. No such column source on a lead. So in a lead object, we are not having a source object, it is saying. Okay, source field we are not having in a lead object. That's what it is saying here. So for the source object,
Yeah.
API name will be lead source actually. So we need to specify that correct name in a dynamic query. Apart from that, everything is correct, I think. Implements database dot batchable. It is correct only. In this here, we need to specify an API name. The field API name is lead source. What the hell? Oh shit, we need to specify semicolon here.